You know all five of these people. No need even for introductions, but each is going to speak for 5 minutes. And I think we'll start with Carol Marie. No, we don't use N's in Chicago, I'm sorry. Boy, I'm telling you. That was pretty good. It's a tough crowd. What are you, all tax accountants? Okay, here we go. Carol Marin, I know who she is.
Thank you,
We'll
Paul
start
Green.
off, and then we'll have a scramble for it's 5 minutes on anything she wants to talk about the election with no interruption from me. Carol, how about a round of applause?
So let's talk, is this on? It is. So let's talk about south of I-80, because that's where I spent some time, and where, up here, we are so Chicago-centric. I am so Chicago-centric that you go south of I-80, and it is a different world and a different point of view. So we go to the Democratic Township Committeeman, we go to the Republican Township Committeeman and say, what are the issues? There's only one issue, and that's jobs. There is no other conversation as far as I could see. I mean, yes, they're concerned about lots of things, schools and to some way down the line, social issue things, but not much. It is all jobs. It is a fear of taxes. But what really struck me in this sort of polarized political landscape anyway is that unprompted, people would bring up Mike Madigan's name. Now, I think 4 years ago, 8 years ago, you wouldn't have heard that. But sort of the bugaboo of Chicago is, as much as they haven't loved Chicago before, they see gridlock as meaning Chicago. Their anger and their conversation about Madigan is strong. And then you say, okay, who are you going to vote for? And the pauses, a woman was crossing a bridge from her daycare center, and I stopped her and I said, would you talk to me about who you're going to vote for? And she just put her head down and said, I just hate them all. I have voted Republican most of my life. I've switched over to Democrats some of my life, and I don't want to pull the trigger on any of these candidates. Nothing lifts my heart. My husband came home the other day and said that one of his colleagues early voted up here. She lives in Hinsdale, in that corner of Cook County, or corner of Hinsdale that is Cook County. And I said, how did she vote? He said, she skipped the governor's race. She skipped the Senate race. She weighed in on the assessor's race. She skipped the judges. She went home disheartened. Because, again, she's a voter. She believes in voting. And I begin to wonder how many ballots are going to come back in this election that are incomplete, more incomplete than we have seen in the past. I think our challenge isn't just necessarily who will turn out. I think it is who will actually mark all of the available races with any enthusiasm at all. Next.
Thank you.
Sure.
Abdon, would you have root canal this morning?
I did.
Prepared for this by going to the dentist to have root canal work.
So your questions will be easy by comparison.
We are deducting it from his fee for that. Go ahead, Abdon. You got 5 minutes if you can take it.
I'll say something you won't hear much about.
This is Abdon Pallasch, the political editor or political writer for the Chicago Sun-Times.
And
Give him a round of applause.
I'll say something nice about both the candidates running for Senate. You can make an argument either one of these guys would be great senators. Mark Kirk would start on day one, more knowledgeable than probably 90 other senators on certain foreign policy issues because he's been to Afghanistan and has done work on Iran and other, perhaps not as much as he sometimes says he does, but he's done work and he is knowledgeable. Alexi Janulius really did put the power of the Treasurer's office behind, holding some of these banks' feet to the fire, saying, hey, you're going to keep this business here in Illinois, or I'm going to pull all the state's money out of you, so he can argue to be a spokesman for, middle-class folks. And you won't hear much of that in the commercials over the next 2 weeks. They'll all focus on the negative, and I think that's one criticism fairly leveled against those of us in the mainstream liberal drive-by dinosaur media, that we focus on the negative too much. So we'll keep that in mind. A couple other points. this is a different crowd. If every vote in Illinois paid as much attention as you folks do, we'd probably have better elected officials, and people would not have incomplete ballots. Do not vote without grabbing a Sun-Times or even that other paper, something to go into the voting booth to know how to vote on the judges. There will be 68 judges up for retention. Don't just go by Irish names or whatever. Take your ballot in there and know who the bar association.
Be careful, you don't know where you're at.
I say that, and I get in arguments. People will say, the minority folks caucusing to settle on a mayoral candidate, and some people have a problem with that. I say, those of us in certain ethnicities have held the mayor's seat for 69 of the last 77 years. Can you blame them for, trying? Come on. And there's another argument that perhaps we should just forget about February and March. Dawn Clark-Netsch has made this statement to me here, and I've used this in other stories that I've done about a lot of what is going to happen in this city and how many federal funds flow into the city will be determined on November 2nd. So let's focus on November 2nd before we focus on February and April. What other races? We'll go by your questions for what else we want to talk about here.
Very good, Abdon, and you did it well. Well, we have another foreign dignitary with us today from Springfield. Dave McKinney. Round of applause. Remember, he has to live in the State House.
I was telling some people this morning that when I started on the beat in 1995, my editor out there, Don Hayner, had said, we want to get you back up here. This is not where you want to be. And Springfield has turned out to be a lively place. It's been, as you know, the last two governors, we've had a lot of news and a lot of activity to deal with. So I'm happy I'm there. I think this election for the governor's race is a really important one for that very reason. I mean, when you think about the George Ryan era and the Blagojevich era, we have an opportunity now to really kind of zero in on these guys and make an informed decision and pick somebody. But yet, yesterday I was following the candidates around, and if many of you picked up the paper today, you saw the story both in our paper and the Tribune. The story out of the governor's race was about a dog euthanasia bill. And you think about, my God, we've got a $13 billion deficit. We have, it's supposed to grow to $15 billion next year. We have social service providers that aren't getting paid. It's just a complete meltdown. And this is kind of what our dialogue has devolved into in this race. And so, I think over the next 2 weeks, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic between Quinn and Brady. And I think, I used the analogy in talking to somebody today that it feels almost like it's a basketball game where Brady is the team that is in the lead, and they've got this big lead built up at halftime, and they're entering the third quarter with the big lead, and they're just trying to hold it, and they're trying to hold it. And you've seen those basketball games where the lead slips away suddenly, and in that fourth quarter, that final shot makes it. And I don't know if Quinn is going to be able to pull it out, but I do have a sense that the race is tightening. I think Quinn, by zeroing in on this dog thing of all things, knowing that everybody's a pet owner and that it somehow strangely resonates when we have so much other stuff going on, it's an interesting tactic. I've been paying attention also to the legislative races because that's a little bit under the radar screen, but there's an interesting thing going on in the Illinois House, and Carol here has written about it somewhat, that the House Republicans are energized, like the whole Republican Party is energized this year. They want to retake the House from Mike Madigan for the first time since 1997. And they need 12 seats to do that, which is a mighty big margin to pull off. I think in 1994, the House Republicans wound up picking 13 seats off from Madigan, and that swung the House to the Republican control. It was like the only time that Madigan's speakership had been disrupted since the early 80s. I don't know, from talking to different people, that the House Republicans are still very optimistic that they can pull this off. I've talked to other Republicans who think that they may pick up 6 seats because Madigan is engaged. He knows that the tide is against him, and he's working his tail off. You see in his district that he's sending out mail pieces in his district. It's as safe district as it can be, but yet he's doing that. And I also heard kind of an anecdote that entertained me that there's an incumbent that he's trying to protect in the northwest suburbs, and this incumbent is not known as an early riser. And so every day in this campaign cycle, Madigan is sending a staffer to this legislator's house. 8 a.m. It's his wake-up call because he's going to get out and he's going to knock on doors. And so that's what Mike Madigan is out doing right now. He's working his tail off. And so, You know, that to me is as an interesting of a political story as the governor's race is, those two issues. So I think November 2nd we'll have some news to report, but that's my 2 cents.
Okay, very good. Round of applause. Always start off with a round of applause. Very good. Mary Mitchell, you're up next.
Well, thank you very much for including me in this panel. Well, first of all, I normally don't cover politics. I cover politics only on special occasions, like when Senator Barack Obama ran for the White House. I kind of got drawn into that, and it was a great thing. I learned a lot during that time. Last weekend, I spent time in Detroit, and you might wonder, what does Detroit have to do with Chicago politics? Well, I got to tell you, in Detroit, everywhere I went, and I met a lot of people in Detroit, in rooms just like this economic club where Mayor Bean was speaking, every single person asked me a question about Chicago politics. But you know what they asked me about? They didn't ask me about the governor's race. They didn't ask me about the senator's race. They asked me about Rahm Emanuel and the mayor's race. That's every single person, and I must have spoken to, 10 people walking up to me just out of the blue saying, what do you think about that? So nationally, the politics that's going on in Chicago affects us, the U.S. nationally. We can almost gauge what's going to happen by just looking at what's going on in Chicago. The other thing that I've learned from covering my limited coverage of politics is the power of the media. You guys get a lot of credit up here for shaping how people feel about a candidate. It's not just the money. A person has a whole lot of money and a big chest of money. They can go out and buy ads, some of those stupid ads that we see on the TV, the one that, with Alexi in a little car, or the one with, Mark Kirk telling lies. They can buy that. But it is the media, the stories that we write, how we write them, the photos that we put in the newspaper, how we take our subject and how we position them. Whether a story about a candidate runs on page 1 or whether it runs on page 14 really shapes the way the public feels about a candidate or even about an election cycle. You hear so much from us moaning and groaning about how people are not engaged, how people don't care, how people aren't excited, and next thing you know, people aren't engaged, they don't care, and they're not excited. So a lot of that has to do with us. So the other thing I learned is that it's hard to write positive stories about candidates. And the reason why it's hard is because the moment you begin to make a commentary or do a commentary that's positive about a candidate, then they tell you, well, you sold out, you're in the pocket, somehow or another, you got some kind of personal relationship with the candidate. So it's hard for them to get their message out through us. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing, because as I was in Detroit, and when I looked around, I saw the thing that really makes a difference in any city, whether it's Chicago or Detroit or Atlanta or any other city, and that is a passionate heart for people. The people who really do well and the people we really want to send to office are those who don't just want to be there because they got Mr. Mayor or Miss Mayor in front of their name, but because they really love this city or they really love this state. And they really want to make things better for the people of this state. And so if I can do anything or contribute anything to this next election cycle, is kind of be a little bit different. Be able to tell those good stories, tell those positive stories about a candidate, not feel like somehow that's going to make me less of a reporter, and try to encourage people through the writing and through the stories to go out and really be engaged in their civic duty.
Thank you, Mary. Batting cleanup, the pride and joy of Von Steuben High. Damn right. Also a foreign dignitary from Washington, Lynn Sweet.
Is this one? Oh, hold the applause. First of all, everybody, it's great to be back home in Chicago. It's great to see all my sources here. Don't say anything. Mary has it right. All the people from where I am do have a great interest in Illinois politics, but after all, there's only one election people are focusing on right now, and that is the mayoral. But I'll leave that for later. I'm going to focus a little bit on the Senate race. You know the state of the race right now. If all you know about that race is what you've seen from the negative campaign advertising, you would think it would be between a serial embellisher and a mob banker.
Your point?
How many of you in the Senate race are undecided? Okay.
Wow.
You
Wow.
actually expect a city club
That
member
means,
to do that?
hold on, that means that the millions of dollars in ads that are just overwhelming the airwaves, that the email appeals, the new apps, the new ways of political communication, it's not meant for you because you're the decideds. So forget it. Everything you hear in the political advertising and the political communication is not meant for you because nothing's going to change your mind. The state of play in the Senate race is for a shrinking number of undecideds and to get the base out. John Kerry, by the way, is here in Chicago. He's at a fundraiser for Giannoulias right now. And the ostensible press conference reason was to talk about Alexi's support for an energy bill or his energy proposals, but we all know that even the Obama White House wasn't moving a climate bill. But the real, I think, sub-message that Kerry wanted to bring today, by the way, is that the same people who swift voted him are paying for some of these negative ads against Alexi. But the point is, and we could get into it in questions, there is a shrinking number of undecideds. Both campaigns are targeting them. You're not who they want right now. The debate, one of two debates is tonight. The thing to watch for is whether or not any of them make a mistake. At the Meet the Press debate, a week ago Sunday, Alexi did fine except for one misstatement that his opponent tried to exploit dealing with, what else, the banking. So that's what you watch for. What new ground is going to be plowed on the negative stuff as much as, well, you may be illuminated by some issues. There's one other debate. That's their last chance to clean up. In the meantime, there is no reason to think that Alexi won't do everything he can to turn out his base, mainly in the African-American community in Chicago, St. Louis, and tip of southern Illinois. Watch Mark Kirk to focus in western DuPage. I would not be surprised if you see one of the Obamas come back into Chicago before Election Day.
All right. By the way, Lynn, just to clarify, this city club members would never tell anybody what they're voting or if they've decided. I mean, that's just not done here. I mean, sandbagging is part of our Constitution. All right, so here we have the questions. We have Ginny up here and Catherine, I think, is in the back. So two young women would be happy to take your questions. This question is late return. This question is anonymous. It's for everyone. Quickly, and you could go nationally because you're all experts. Pick the biggest possible upset on November 2nd. Give you a second to think. Okay, Lynn, the biggest possible upset.
A big one would be if Harry Reid loses in Nevada.
Okay, Mary.
Any loss by a Tea Party person, that would be an upset, period.
Dave.
I have two of them. I think the Illinois House going to the Republicans, like we talked about, that would be interesting. And then in the state Supreme Court, the retention battle with Justice Kilbride. If he doesn't reach that 60% figure, I think that would be an interesting development.
I think in Illinois congressional races, if Pollack gives Schakowsky a bigger run for her money than she expects.
Abdon.
I will second both of Dave's. If Mike Madigan is no longer speaker, that's a big story. And also, if Forrest Claypool becomes the first independent to ever win a countywide office, I think that's a fairly big story. Those are locals. And on the national level, obviously, Harry Reid. If Harry Reid loses, then Dick Durbin is the majority leader.
Not necessarily.
Well,
Not if the
if his roommate gives him a run for the money, it could be Chuck Schumer. But we have a good chance of having more power headquartered in Chicago.
Okay, now, from the audience, Mr. Lundy, right in front, you get the first question. Jump in quickly. All of you can do quickly because you're good at this. What was, all right,
I'm just asking himself.
it's a 3-inch putt. What's the biggest mistake made by Pat Quinn, and what was the biggest mistake by Bill Brady? Don't put, Kirk Dilworth here. I have such a great line, but I'm not going to do it. In the general election, what is the biggest mistake that each of them has made? Abdon, real quick.
This puppy thing, if I could just say, if we in the dinosaur media could control what the issues are, the puppies, these are the humane societies whose job it is to take care of the puppies and to save them money. If you're going to kill 10 puppies one at a time or kill them all together, what's the big issue? It shouldn't be an issue, but I understand it is an issue because it's, how do you, see, I can say this. I can say this because I'm not running for office. They're just as dead one at a time or 10 at a time.
Settle down,
but
settle down.
it so connects with people. It's like if you're a candidate, you think,
Obviously.
how do you cut through the noise and get someone's attention? Killing puppies. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see this ad of Pat Quinn's that is only on video right now go on the airwaves if he thinks he's going to move voters. Just this morning, as I was getting my root canal, the dental hygienist was saying, "Are you kidding? Bill Brady did that? Oh, I'm voting against him now."
Excellent. That's enough.
So the puppies and Pat Quinn, his biggest. I'll let me think about that. Go ahead.
By the way, congratulations. You just left Alderman Moore totally free with the foie gras stuff. Carol.
Well, apart from cooking fluffy, I think Bill Brady, it's a mistake, maybe if Quinn capitalizes on it in the remaining weeks, is not being able to explain what a dime on a dollar looks like in terms of budget cuts. I just got a tragic letter from a woman, a grandmother, whose grandson had a bike accident. He's unemployed. He didn't have insurance. I mean, it was a cascading list of sorrows, desperately trying to find anyone who could just fix his 2 front teeth so he could try to go apply for a job. Just basic social services. So I think for Brady I think Pat Quinn's biggest mistake is not listening to some sound advice about consistency and about your approach. I mean, I think that he's operated out of his pocket protector for so long that he has not been able to delegate or put his arms around a wider group of trusted advisors whose advice he might disagree with, but whose advice he might need to take.
Pat Quinn, his biggest mistake was letting me take a photo of the inside of his fridge. Okay, go ahead.
Which, by the way, when I took a photo of the inside of his fridge in the governor's mansion, there was a lot of beer.
There you go. Different.
And
Okay.
you had no beer. This
No?
is as we get closer to the election.
I'm sure our guy from Israel is really picking all this stuff up. Go ahead, Dave.
You know what, with Brady, I think the dog thing, that 2 days after the primary, that just seemed like utter nonsense. It's such a strange issue to be going down the pike on. I think another thing with Brady is that he has not moved enough to the center, because that's the route that traditional Republican governors in this state have gone. They've been, middle of the road type people like Edgar and Ryan when he ran, Thompson. They were all appealing to independent voters. I think that's a mistake. For Quinn, I would sort of dovetail a little bit off of what Carol said. I think Quinn's sort of speaking style is, you watch him speak to a group of people, and I mean, you can tell he has heart, which is a line that he keeps using here. But he takes a half hour to say what needs to be said in 10 minutes. He needs, as we say in our industry, a good editor, and he doesn't have that. And so he'll just meander, and you'll lose what his message is, and that's his biggest challenge, I think.
Mary.
I think you can't really answer that question until after November 2nd, but let me just give it a shot now. With Pat Quinn, I would say that Quinn's biggest mistake may prove to be that he believes that it's enough to be a public servant. We say that. We want a public servant. We want somebody that really cares. We want somebody that's going to do the right thing. We want someone who has integrity. But no, we want slick. We want, we want someone who's glib. We want someone who's able to razzle dazzle. We want that too. And so he's not been able to put those two together. He's just Pat Quinn. And he's just a guy who just sort of projects, I want to do the right thing. And I think with if Bill Brady wakes up and he is not the governor, I think it's because he has really taken for granted that all he needs are a segment of the population to win this election, and not really doing enough to go out and court the minority vote to show that he is able to understand what those issues are in communities outside of the communities of his own. So I think that he has done a poor job really bringing a constituency together that includes anything other than those voters that he already has.
Lynn, real quick.
Pat Quinn's biggest mistake is not radiating command and control as a chief executive of the state, though he's had many chances to do it. And Pat Brady has not made a lot of mistakes. He not only has been able
Bill
to...
Brady.
Excuse me.
Pat's made a lot of mistakes.
That's the state party chairman. Forgive me on that. The very smart part of Bill Brady's campaign is that he has been able to rally the Tea Party elements of Illinois without making it a Tea Party campaign, which would be divisive and turn off those body of moderate Republicans in the suburbs whose votes he needs. And he's been able to turn out so far and work the base of the various elements of the Republican Party, and that's to his success so far.
Okay, well, now we're just going to ask one at a time because we have so many questions. And I think we'll start with you, Lynn. Just one person. If anyone else wants to comment, go right ahead. We'll just made the rule. I can just break it. This is from John Birkenbein from the American Insurance Association. Where are you, John? There you are back there. I'm sure your right hand is somewhat cramped from the check writing, but that's a different question. This is the City Club. Question from John. To you, Lynn, how are likely voters determined? Doesn't everyone claim they plan to vote?
Here's how it works in polling. And that's why here are some of the things that you need to know when you say likely voters. There's different ways of rating them. Usually a lot of pollsters use 1 to 10. They could look at your voting history, and pollsters know it because there's a lot of data out there. And they could rank you that a 10 is somebody who's voted every primary in general, or you're a 9 or an 8, or you only occasionally. So it's not just often in some polling your own self-identification if you say you're going to vote, because there's ways of checking it. Now, when a poll says this is a poll of 493 likely voters, then you know those two elements are there. The element that is harder to know is what is the threshold that the pollster has used for calling a likely voter likely. Are they counting the number 5s likely, or are they only using the 10s, the people you know for sure are going to go to the polls? Usually in most of the robocall polls that you have here, they have a lower threshold. If you are paying for your own poll, you could, if you want, get the likely voter potential higher. So there's a few ways to go. That's the summary.
Okay. Abdon, I think I'll give this one to you. This is from Anna, is it Klocek?
Klocek.
Klocek, sorry, Polish American Congress. How will you cover all candidates who are legitimately on the ballot? The Greens, the Libertarians, etc.
There's no way we can, and that's a fair criticism against us. Is I haven't mentioned when I'm talking about the Senate that we also have a Libertarian, Mike Labneau, on the Senate, and a Green Party candidate, Lee Ellen Jones. There's not a lot of money and momentum behind them, and they're not registering in the double digits in the polls. So, limited time and space. We focus on the big party candidates. We should focus on the third party candidates. But the only third party candidates looking like they're doing something is Forrest Claypool in the assessor's race this year. In the governor's race, will the third party guys be a factor? In the Senate race too. Both the Senate and governor are so close that the third party candidates, while there's very little likelihood of them winning, they could be a factor. Scott Lee Cohen did win the lieutenant governor's race.
Yes, he did.
Will he take votes away from Quinn? Will he take votes away from Brady? I think the Quinn's people are hoping that he takes as many votes away from Brady as he does from Quinn, and is a wash. Rich Whitney last time took 10% of the vote in the race for governor, making the Green Party a party in this state that qualifies for the lower threshold of getting on the ballot. He's not registering that high this year. He's about 3%. Certainly, if you see him, and when Carol interviewed him on WTTW, many would argue that he has a better understanding of the budget than anybody else in that race. But will he get more than 3% remains to be seen.
Carol, this will go to you. This is from, and excuse me, we need more Irish names here. The last name is L-A-D, is it Ashen? I don't want to, Ashen. Okay, very good question. Carol, with Cook County being larger than 3 dozen states and in a large financial mess, why isn't the race for Cook County Board President getting much more media attention?
That is a good question. It's partially because it's considered right now a slam dunk that Roger Keats, the Republican candidate, and I've just blanked on the, help me here.
Tony Preck.
No, not Tony, there's a third candidate. Thank you, Tom Tresser. But Preckwinkle, I mean, is considered just a foregone conclusion based on the way that Cook County tends to vote. But the question is exactly right in terms of what our enormous challenges are in Cook County. If you just consider Chicago, which sits in the middle of Cook County, and today in the newspaper, Fran Spielman had a piece saying just for the pensions, we will have to make $650 million in contributions a year for 40 years. When you consider, Chicago sitting in the midst of Cook County, the crisis in Cook County, and Cook County takes care of the people, like the woman who wrote to me, who has no resources, is unemployed, has no insurance. It's the last resort government for so many people here. I think it really is a profound problem. But the other side of it is this. Most of us don't interact with what Cook County provides. Most of us are not at the jail. Most of us are not in the courts. Most people actually do not have children in school. Most people do not go to the Cook County Hospital. And as a consequence, it might as well be as far away from us as downstate is south of I-80.
But who's the us? But who's the us? Because there is a large population of people who in the Chicago area who depend upon Cook County. They understand Cook County services. They may not be in jail, but maybe their cousin Bobo is in jail.
No, I agree with you, but what I'm saying is that there is a disconnect in those who intersect, who that system
Right,
touches.
but the disconnect is only for a certain segment of the population. There's another segment of the population, they're not disconnected at all. They understand Cook County Hospital and the value of Cook County Hospital. They are sitting around wondering when all that mess was going on with Todd Stroger. They're sitting around wondering what's going to happen to them now if Cook County Hospital goes down. And we don't, in fairness, we don't concentrate enough on covering Cook County government. The disconnect is there because people don't really understand what Cook County government pays for. They don't understand really how many services are provided by Cook County government. And I think that's a problem for the media more than it's a problem for the electorate.
I think it was a bigger problem 10 years ago before I had the beat and Steve Patterson had the beat, and I think the Sun-Times, at least, and the Tribune, too. Yeah, there you go. I think it was our stories on Cook County government that helped get, Forrest Claypool and Larry Suffering, a lot of the reformers onto that board that opened this up to the sunlight and got changes made at the Juvenile Detention Center and also at Cook County Hospital, got it separated from the day-to-day political control of the Cook County Cook County Board President's office. So I think there's been an increase in good coverage. Could we do more? Absolutely, yeah.
I'll take some culpability on that because I was part of the stupid move to make them single-member districts, which was awful. They actually think they're legislators. All Cook County Board is are a bunch of auditors. I mean, it's just, hey, you can't always be right. Okay. Now, Jeff Riley, you got 2 questions. I was only went to a customer here, sir. This is, but I think we'll ask this of Dave McKinney. We'll ask your Carol Rove question. From Jeff Riley. Carol Rove is spending millions in the Senate race, around the country, I guess. Will this make a difference in an already very negative race? If so, how? Is he putting on, does he have commercials for Kirk that are generic?
You know what? I'm going to punt on that question because I've not been real engaged in the Senate race.
Carl
you don't know
Rove
that?
is.
Who's the questioner? Who are you?
Jeff Riley, raise your hand, Jeff.
And everyone else. You're referring to commercials that are really, the organization is America's Crossroads. It's linked to Karl Rove. He is not running it in any day-to-day, but it is, Karl Rove's name is a trigger to help trigger Democratic turnout. That is the reason Democrats keep saying it. Negative commercials are being run by the both Senate campaigns, and they're basically on the theme of mob banker, serial liar, variations of that. The reason you see all these negative campaign commercials is because they work. They work either to make you not want to vote, which is if you're in a Democratic area and you're a Republican, that's not bad. That's not a bad outcome. That might be the money well spent. So negative commercials are out there at this stage in the campaign in these closing weeks because they work. Now, the Republicans right now have been spending more. Republican allied groups, National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, the Kirk Campaign, America Crossroads, and the Chamber of Commerce, up until now have been outspending the Alexei Giannoulis campaign and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. But the Giannoulis campaign has been marshaling its millions, and you'll see some very big ad buys, almost, not quite, on parallel in these closing days of the election. So whether or not it's a group of America Crossroads or any of these other allied groups, you see it because it works.
Okay, Dave, here's a question for you. This is from Judith Reese, member of the City Club, who writes that she is driving through downstate and she sees many Scott Lee Cohn posters and signs. What's the effort on that? Is that going to have any impact?
Well, I don't know, but it's a very good observation. He's blanketed downstate like crazy. My son goes to Knox College in Galesburg, and Galesburg is not going to be a major vote center in this race, I don't think, but there are Scott Lee Cohen billboards all over Galesburg, of all places. So, I see him in Springfield, I see him in Decatur, and it's clear to me that he is putting an enormous amount of money into his campaign. Now, what effect that'll have, it's hard for me to imagine Cohen getting more than 10% of the vote. Just because he's in a crowded field.
But today he is meeting, forgive me for interrupting, with about 100 African-American ministers. He is doing outreach across communities. I was at a senior citizens fair out in the south suburbs, and when he walked in, virtually everyone goes, "That's Scott Lee Cohen. I've seen him on TV. He's the pawnbroker. Wasn't that the lieutenant governor's race?" And they went up to him. And I'll tell you something, in person, Scott Lee Cohen can be very charismatic.
It's very charming. Yeah.
Very charming, comes across, seems to cut through that, the clutter of the screen, and there are people who are going to vote affirmatively for Scott Lee Cohen.
Well, and on top of that, the billboard on the way in was when I was driving up from Springfield on the Stevenson. It's somewhere around Cicero, I think. There's a Spanish billboard that he's got there. He's reaching out to all constituencies, like Carol says. So, it'll be an interesting thing, but I just think in a crowded field, he's going to have the reality is that the major party candidates, Brady and Quinn, are going to take the lion's share of these votes. They've got the most organizations behind them, the most money, and I think that, I think he'll be a spoiler, but I don't.
Yeah, but so who is he going to hurt most?
The
Who's gonna be
initial
hurt
fear
most by it?
was that he was he would kill it for Quinn, that it was already a close election, and by him getting in it, that meant that there's no way Quinn could win because all his votes would come out of Quinn's hide. But the polling so far has shown when they weren't including his name, Brady was ahead of Quinn. Where they included his name, Brady's vote total dropped down and came even with Quinn. So that would indicate that there are people who would vote for Scott Lee Cohen who would otherwise vote for Brady, and I think that's calmed the Quinn people down.
But
you never know.
The main thing with Cohen that is driving the success, though, is that his message is jobs, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
Whether people are really getting these jobs at job fairs, I don't know. But I think the reality is he has tapped a nerve that neither of the other candidates really have zeroed in on, because I would challenge any of you in this room to articulate what Pat Quinn's jobs plan is or what Bill Brady's jobs plan is, because they haven't really done a good job themselves of articulating what it is.
This is a Paul Green question, and you are allowed to take a pass, but now's the time to spring it on him, right? Just think if Scott Lee Cohen did not have that stupid press thing during the Super Bowl and take himself out of the race when he dropped from being lieutenant governor. A race, by the way, he won by the largest number of votes of any candidate for governor or lieutenant governor. What would it be like right now if he was Pat Quinn's running mate?
It'd be over, Brady would be way ahead.
Brady be way ahead?
Or we'd be looking at the other lieutenant governor, because Jason Plummer is the mystery guy who won't reveal his income taxes. It might be a real lieutenant governor contest that might be pretty interesting.
Dave, what do you think? Quinn Cohn.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it has, it reminds me of Blagojevich Quinn in a way, I mean, you just have, well...
Or Oscar and Felix?
Yeah, well, Oscar and Felix. I think, we'd all be still focusing on the domestic violence aspect of Cohen. He would still be, he would, because he would be a major party candidate, he would be getting a lot more attention. And I think there would be still continued digging on those things in his closet.
Mayor?
I think even in that case, even the negative coverage would be better than the coverage that Quinn has gotten with, unfortunately, Sheila Simon. I mean, she just has not resonated. We don't read very much about her. She hasn't brought very much to the Quinn ticket. And if she does bring something, we will see it, I guess, on the election day. But right now, no one's really talking about the Simon Quinn ticket or the Quinn Simon ticket.
Lynn?
You would have more women beater ads cluttering up the airwaves than you would be able to count if he had remained on the ticket.
Balance out the puppy killing, though.
So the general consensus at the panel is that he's really doing well for governor, but he'd have been a complete loser for lieutenant governor.
Well, I think, again, you'd see a situation where, like Blagojevich Quinn, where they don't talk to each other. I think Quinn would be doing everything he could to stay distant from him, And that,
But quickly, that is only situational, Paul. If he was polling better, then people would start looking more. This is we have a lot of races going on, and people do make decisions on coverage, both the many citizen journalists out there, which is a new feature in this election, other entities that do research. You pick your spots, and for the moment, if he doesn't seem a factor, then you move on to something else. If he seems a factor, then some of his record will be resurrected.
And if he was running for lieutenant governor and getting great poll numbers because his job's message was resonating, maybe Quinn would say he was a man of integrity and put up with him.
Quinn has a record of doing that in the past too, with people running for governor. I just think that it would be an enormous plus for Quinn, simply because then you would start focusing on the mystery man, this fellow, the plumber, who still does not need security to walk down Michigan Avenue. So, I think it would be a very, very interesting factor there. And I know Quinn would do a lot better in the 34th Ward, which doesn't have many cones, but in the primary, against African-American candidates, Cone actually, I think, if not carried, came very close of carrying that South Side Ward. Now, you figure out why, and we'll move on. Okay, this is for everybody, because this is a ringer question. Not that I assume you were ready for this. Steve Regario. What does Jay Levine's confrontation with William Kelly during a Rahm Emanuel interview indicate about the Chicago mainstream media? Should we be asking Rahm tougher questions? Steve, are you a Kelly man? Where are you, Steve? Raise your hand. Cowards die many times before their death. A valiant takes death but once. Steve prefers to be anonymous, which is a city club privilege. Who wants to tackle the Jay Levine scenario? Go ahead, Abdon.
I'll take that one. You start with the easy question, then move on to the tough questions. The problem was that our fellow members of the mainstream media never got to get past their initial icebreaker question because Kelly, who is not a journalist, he was there as a provocateur and political activist, was shouting things so that he sort of broke up the news conference before it started. And it's kind of a shame because we never want to get in the business of regulating who is a journalist, who is not. But when there's someone clearly there is not to bring light but just heat and spark confrontations as opposed to starting an orderly series of questions that work up to harder questions, I felt that Kelly misrepresented himself by saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a reporter. I work for WIND," when actually just he buys airtime on WIND and is not engaged in the same business of journalism that Levine or Charles Thomas were there.
Anyone else care to touch that one? Abdon, your profile and courage. Very good. Well,
I'm sure I'll be on. If you're watching me on Kelly's show, nice to see you.
okay, I have one last question. There's one here about Scott Lee Cohn, but I think we've kind of covered him already. He's getting a lot of publicity already. spending millions on advertising and not paying child support. I think that shows you a man's got priorities. Okay, now, you can see why I'm a former elected official. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, you've been basically skating pretty easily through this, using that old sometimes kind of moving and shaking. Now, if you wish, you could take a pass. But starting with Abdon, we'll start with you because you're on a roll. Who do you think is going to win the Illinois Senate race, and who do you think is going to win the Illinois governor's race?
I'm going to take a qualified pass on that just because I really think it's still fluid. I think they're so close. Even months ago, before Mark Kirk started having his problems with the embellishments and everyone was saying it's over, I said, no, this is still a blue state. The Democrats, despite their best efforts, could still win in both those two races. And I still think this. I think anybody says they know, they're wrong. And the polls right now that show Brady leading Quinn by up to 10 points or more, I think those will tighten up. I think it's all still fluid in those two big races.
Carol?
I think it is too. I think Brady has maintained, and again, this gets to part what Lenny was talking about in polling. A lot of the people who are not polling are the people who have cell phones. We presume they're younger, but as I learned again downstate, some of them are farmers. I mean, we're not picking up a constituency that gave up their landlines. So I'm not sure how much I believe in the polls. The polls that I have seen seem to give Brady a pretty consistent 3 to 7 point spread across all of the polls. If I had to guess, I mean, I think he has the edge on that. But I don't know, and I do think it will tighten. With Janulius and Kirk, I just wouldn't do that jump ball. I mean, I think it can go any way, and turnout will decide it.
Dave?
I think in the governor's race that right now the edge very clearly is in Brady's corner. It's his to lose. But I think that Quinn is a strong finisher. We saw that in the primary. People in that final week or week and a half with Dan Hines, people thought Hines was going to win, and then at the last moment, Quinn pulls it out. I think, I think in the Senate race, again, I've kept a bit of a distance from that, but I still think that Illinois being the blue state that it is, that is just a built-in advantage for Alexei. And I think since both these candidates have just the litany of problems they do, that cancels each other out. So if I were to guess, I would say just a slight edge to Alexei.
Mary?
I hate to give an answer to a question like this because it always comes back to haunt you, but I would say that I just cannot see Pat Quinn really losing this race. I know everybody's saying, Brady's this, Brady's that. I just don't see that. I think at the last minute there's going to be some heightened campaigning. I think that we're now got to, buckle our seatbelts because there's going to be some bombshells. People are now, scurrying around trying to find out all the really, really, really dirty laundry so they can get it out there. And I think that Quinn has a built-in advantage because he's an incumbent of sorts. As it comes to the Alexei and Mark Kirk, maybe conventional wisdom says Mark Kirk because he's got all this money and he's got all these negative ads out there that he will get it. But I think that Alexei has, he has an ace in the hole. He's going to have the support of the Obama administration. I think that Obama administration still is very, very effective, popular in Illinois, and that's going to make a difference. So I'm going with Alexei and Quinn.
Lynn?
Edge for now, Brady, unless he makes a mistake, or Quinn finds some new narratives.
Or he runs those puppy ads.
Well, the Senate race is just, you can't call it now, especially with these two debates out there.
Okay. By the way, for your information, Illinois right now is one of the few real toss-up states left in the nation. And good possibility that though you may not be too thrilled with the candidates, as goes Illinois may very well go the control of the United States Senate. So there's going to be a lot of money being thrown into this in the last couple of weeks. How about a big round of applause for our